Hi there, I'm Donna Wolfe from Naztazia.com.
Today I'm going to show you how to crochet the corner-to-corner stitch pattern, sometimes known as the diagonal block stitch. This creates nice blocks, which you can convert into pictures and geometric shapes. The stitch pattern is worked diagonally, starting with the lower left block you see. To begin, make a slip knot on your hook and then chain 6. For row 1, we're only going to make one block. And each block throughout this pattern is made pretty much the same way each time. We'll start off by skipping the first 3 chains, and then we'll make 1 double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook, and make another double crochet in the 5th chain from the hook. And finally, the 3rd double crochet will go in the 6th chain from the hook. You can see how a nice little block has formed. So we'll turn our work and prepare for row 2. As you can see, row 2 has 2 blocks on it. We'll begin these increase rows the same way each time. For row 2, we'll start off with a chain 6, just as we did on row 1. And, as we did before, we'll skip the first 3 chains for this pattern. And in the 4th chain from the hook, we'll make our first double crochet stitch. In the 5th chain, we'll make the 2nd double crochet stitch. And finally, in the 6th chain, we'll make our 3rd and final double crochet stitch. Now we need to connect this block somehow to the other block. What we do to accomplish this is make a slip stitch into the top of the previous row 1 block's chain 3 space. Now we need 2 blocks on this row. So we'll start our second block a little bit differently by doing a chain 3. Now we'll use row 1's block's chain 3 space again. This time we'll work across it since it is a horizontal row at this time, and 3 double crochet. Now you can see how we have worked diagonally. As we move on to row 3, we need to make 3 blocks on row 3 for this pattern. We start off increase rows the same way each time. Begin with a chain 6 as we did for both row 1 and row 2's starting chain, and like we did before, we'll skip the first 3 chains. And then we make our first double crochet stitch in the 4th chain from the hook, our second one in the 5th chain from the hook, and finally the 3rd and last double crochet in the 6th chain from the hook. We need to connect this block to all of the other ones again. That was just the first block. We need to make yet another block. So we begin blocks inside the squares by starting with a chain 3 instead. And then across the previous row block's chain 3 space, we're going to use that as a horizontal row to put our 3 double crochet stitches into. I need to connect this again, so I'll place my slip stitch into the space of the previous block's chain 3 space. And we're not done yet because the rule states that we need to have 3 blocks on row 3. So we start off with the chain 3, and then we proceed with making the 3 double crochet stitches using the chain 3 space from the previous row's block. Now we check our work. As you would expect, row 4 has to have 4 blocks on it. So we begin row 4 by turning our work and making our 6 chains, which is how we start all of the increase rows. And I'm skipping over to the major sections here. You'll do the 3 double crochet and connect it to the main square part with a slip stitch. For the second block, you'll do the chain 3 so you can begin a block inside of the square. And you'll continue on making double crochet stitches and more blocks so you end up with 4 blocks on this diagonal row. We'll move on to our 5th and final increase row, and I'm going to change colors at this time. I'll undo the last part of my last double crochet stitch and finish it instead with the new color yarn. Now we'll proceed just like it's a normal increase row. We'll turn our work, and to begin row 5, we'll chain 6, and as always, we'll do our 3 double crochet stitches, then slip stitch to the chain 3 space so we can connect the new block to the entire square. And for this row, we'll need to make sure we have 5 blocks on it in a diagonal manner. As you can see, I have been successful in getting 5 blocks on my 5th row in my sample. And guess what starts to happen next? We're going to start decrease rows. So forget that starting chain 6. We'll have a new way to begin decrease rows. As we move on to row 6, we'll take note that there are only 4 blocks on this row. That's because we need to decrease this row by 1 block from the previous row. So we turn our work, and to begin row 6, we start with slip stitches all the way over until we reach the previous block's chain 3 space. So we make slip stitches over the 3 double crochet stitches from that block. And then we make a slip stitch right into the chain 3 space from the previous block. And to repeat, we need only 4 blocks on this row. So we continue on with this row like we did before. We'll do a chain 3 to start the block. Then we connect this block with a slip stitch to the previous row's block. We'll move on to the second block with the chain 3 to begin it, the 3 double crochet stitches, and then a slip stitch to connect it. Then we do this all again for block number 3 on this row, and then the slip stitch to serve as a connector. Now we make our final and 4th block for this row, and then the slip stitch to the previous chain 3, which is at the very top of this square that we're making. As you can see, we have been successful in making 4 blocks for row 6, which is a decrease row in this pattern. And now we'll move on to row 7, which decreases even further, as there are only 3 blocks on this diagonal row. So we'll begin row 7 in the same way we began row 6. We'll turn our work, and then we'll make slip stitches over the 3 double crochet stitches, and then make 1 into the chain 3 space from the previous block. You probably know the pattern by now. We'll start off with the chain 3, then make our 3 double crochet stitches, and then slip stitch to the previous chain 3 space of the block to connect it. Once you get your 3 blocks on this row 7, it's time to move on to row 8. And row 8 only has 2 blocks on it. So we'll begin with the slip stitches and proceed to make just 2 blocks on this row. Once completed, count to ensure you have 2 blocks on the row. And finally, our last row is row 9, which only has 1 block on it. So we'll do our slip stitches to the chain 3 and then make our 3 double crochet stitches and slip stitch to finish this row. As you can see, we have successfully started the pattern by increasing, and then we moved on to decreasing. And that's it. That's how I crochet the corner to corner stitch pattern, also known as the diagonal box stitch.